Dear Father in heaven, we thank you so much for gathering us here together. We pray, we just want to say thank you for all the blessings that you gave us today, for the beautiful day, for helping us to get our vaccines, for pray that you will bless Fel and Legina as they get their last one on this Friday. And we just pray that you'll be here with us this evening and help us to understand this message, help us to pay attention and be alert and understand the truths that you're teaching us. And we just pray that the people, everyone will understand the decisions that they're making and help them to decide correctly, whether to be selfish or selfless. And we pray that you'll help everyone to understand that the significance of their decisions. And we pray for everyone for that. And we pray all this in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Yeah, it's interesting when you say that selfish or selfless,
Bless.
because way back when, in the days when I was married, and going through all the issues with alcoholism, I learned back then that, like with addictions and disease and all, that addictions and that it really is a selfish disease that they can't come out of. I mean, there's a lot of different things to it, but I really stopped and thought, what leads a person to make such a choice between their family and alcohol? You know what I mean? And it eventually led me to understand about literally selfishness being the core of sin, whereas selfless is the core of love. That's the way to say it,
Yeah.
So it's all, when it's all about self, and we don't know so much. I mean, especially when I look my pre-Christian days, and it's all about taking care of yourself. And to a point, yeah, we do have to take good care of ourselves to be able to be capable of helping others.
Mm-hmm.
Society is really geared towards self-help, take care of self, in a strong negative direction. So there's a healthy selfishness when it comes to taking care of yourself so that you can take care of others.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's that unhealthy me. I got to have what I want. I'm going to take care of me.
So here's a question that might be rhetorical. I don't know. So say, somebody who's very selfless, goes and does things for other people all the time, but shies away from God because they misunderstand God. Is that a bad person? Will we see them in heaven?
I think, to me, I found a lot of those answers coming through this particular message tonight that we're going to go through.
Cool.
Maybe we'll go through it and see the issues in the Millerite history, because I really gained a lot better understanding going through this process. It helps me so much to go through and transcribe and put it into the notes and that. It really helps me. So yeah, we'll touch on that. And so when we get to that part, we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Where the part that what I'm thinking about, that would pertain to that.
Perfect.
Because I've always had a lot of questions about that too, so it was very nice to hear her say that the people are going to be waking up in heaven. And I've heard that said before, that they're going to wake up in heaven and don't even know who Jesus is. So okay, so this was from Brazil. Oh, I got the wrong one up here. So hang on just a second. I don't know how I wound up with that. I would have caught it. The title was wrong. Oh, but I need to exit out of there. Get my slideshow off if I can. Guess I don't have to have it on share screen to do that. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to close this one so it's out of my way. And open the other one. Oh, I did both close. Both weren't supposed to close. I apologize. Two streams identifying threat. There we go. I had them both open because I was taking the board work from the other one. Okay, so now you can see it, right? That's still two streams of creation. Uh-oh, I hope I didn't do something wrong. Give me just a minute. I had it open, but I had them both open.
Okay, no worries.
And two streams of creation. Oh, I have a huge little slight problem here all of a sudden. Why are they? I apologize. They're titled wrong. And I don't know what happened. I hope I haven't lost that whole. Maybe I just didn't change the title on the front. That's possible. Give me just a second and I apologize.
No worries.
No worries.
Okay, here we go. Got it. Yeah, that's what I did. I didn't change the title. Okay. I had the title all over the whole thing, just not there.
Okay.
Had me panicked there for a second. Lost all my work.
Yeah, I was panicking for you.
Oh, yeah, it's okay to have a little typo, but I thought I lost the whole thing. It's like I just was working on it. Okay, so this was from the Brazil camp meeting. And I'm going to remove that thing at the top. Remember, we know how to remove that. And just remind me if I wind up lost trying to find it again, I hit escape. You know what I'm talking about, right? Okay. Okay. So, so this was identifying the threat, part of the Brazil camp meeting, and she's again, you know, talking about how the Constitution became Christian, and talking about how it's not our template. The Midnight Cry gave us three particular structures. So I put up here as a reminder the three particular structures that were discussed, that have been being discussed. Adventism being modern Israel, in the first and second histories are failure, and then this last history, our history, is success. The papacy, or the counterfeit, comes in three histories as well. The first two are failure and the final is success. And then Protestantism, which opened up in Brazil 2019, February of 2019, with the studies of In God We Trust, showing these three histories, two of them being failure and then the final one being success. And those A.T. Jones documents I have been finding really invaluable to understanding this even better. So those are the three structures, and the Adventism, or the Alpha and Omega of modern Israel, is to teach us about God's people. And then the counterfeit is teach us about the papacy. And the third was In God We Trust, designed to teach us about Protestantism. So Adventism, Catholicism, Protestantism, and God is teaching us about all three through their structures. Each one is covering the history from the time of the end, 1798. There's two histories of failure with the final history of success. Their structures follow the same pattern. Protestantism, it's Protestantism that enacts the Sunday law. And the increase of knowledge of the Sunday law is our template. And that's where we're getting this increase of knowledge on our Sunday law. And it was given to us in February of 2019. So sorry for the repeat. I just was doing it from memory, and then there it was. So sorry. Okay, so here's the line that we're going to look at through most of this study, where we have the first great awakening, the second great awakening, we have the old side, new side, and then we have it's supposed to be old school, new school in the second great awakening that carries you through to 1844. Then we have the history of the Civil War and on into the 1900s. That's the first history that the document covers. We have 1888 in here, where Ellen White, we're going to read some of her quotes here on this history. And then we have the 40s and the 50s, early 40s and 50s, and then 1979 till now. So these are the histories that we're going to look at. So Review and Herald, December 24th, 1889, paragraph 1. I have been much burdened in regard to the movements that are now in progress. So she's talking about movements. It's 1889, movements that are now in progress for the enforcement of Sunday observance. It has been shown to me that Satan has been working earnestly to carry out his designs to restrict religious liberty. Plans of serious import to the people of God are advancing in an underhanded manner. among the clergymen of various denominations. And the object of this secret maneuvering is to win popular favor for the enforcement of Sunday sacredness. If the people can be led to favor a Sunday law, then the clergy intend to exert their united influence to obtain a religious amendment to the Constitution and compel the nation to keep Sunday. So this is 1889, and the arguments that are taking place, and A.T. Jones, the arguments that he's giving, and all the documents that he's read. So there are movements that are now in progress to enact a Sunday law to restrict religious liberty, being done in an underhanded manner. And I'm thinking about Philomena, was it it might have been the document before, I don't remember if it was the one on Monday night, where it talks about the ill-informed. Was that Monday night? The ones that are ill-informed?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, Monday night. So there's people that are ill-informed, and this paragraph makes me think of that. If the people can be led to favor, so I would think that there are people that are ill-informed and they'll favor it and they get behind it based on some of those documents that we've been reading. So the point was made in 2019 that she is standing here in 1888 in a history of failure. So here's this history of failure for both Adventism and Protestantism. The first history of this first movement, the work is then in progress. So it's in progress here in 1889. It was 130 years ago, she says, will lead to the National Sunday Law. And then the second sentence that we read in the previous paragraph, Satan is working earnestly to bring this about. Plans are being advanced through various Protestant denominations. Secrecy can be easily misunderstood. These actions were not invisible. So if the people can be led to favor a Sunday law, then the clergy intend to exert their united influence to obtain a religious amendment to the Constitution and compel the nation to keep Sunday. So if you can get the people to favor a Sunday law, you're going to have all these people in full support. And what we were reading the other night, Christine, was a document where it talked about people being ill-informed, talked about how they get more people behind what they're doing, talked about the people that were actually part of it, and we'll kind of lace some of that through this study as we went through, but how people are part of it. There's those that are eager to participate and enjoy persecution, and then there's others that are there that are not inhumane like that, but they also don't do anything about it, and they're just as guilty. And you can compare and contrast that to the Republican Party today. So there's 130 years ago, there was movements to amend the Constitution that were now in progress at this time to enforce Sunday. Those movements are now dead. The Constitution was viewed as a pagan document or a godless document that needed to be amended. And now it's viewed as a Christian document by Protestantism. So in this history here, they consider it a Christian document by Protestantism, and there's no amendment needed. And so how the Constitution became Christian is trying to answer how that happened. The document that we read by Jared A. Goldstein is trying to answer how that happened, how we got from wanting to movements to make an amendment to enforce Sunday to how we're already a Christian, that the document is Christian. And we were talking about that some on Monday night too, how I can look at my family and think that none of them go to church, none of them ever pick up a Bible. And I know where I was at before I picked up a Bible. I didn't know who God was. I didn't know who Jesus was, but I believed there was a God. And so when they talk about this being a Christian nation, I would have been right there with it, in total ignorance, thinking this is a Christian nation when I don't even know what a Christian is. So, hey, don't do that. Don't do that. So with that being the case, when it comes to the Sunday law, what do we do with Ellen White's writings? Because those movements are dead now. That's not what they're trying to do. They're not trying to change the Constitution. They're not trying to enforce a Sunday law. So we can reason together through strict, perfect methodology using structures that God has given us. And we just looked at that structure and then all the other lines as well. So in our history now, we no longer want to amend the Constitution. a change from where she stood to where we stand now. So there were in the 40s and 50s, there's a mixture between amending and interpretation. So back here, they want to amend it. There's a mixture of amending and interpretation. And then in our history, it's all about interpretation. They just interpret it as a Christian document. So there's no need to amend it when they view it and interpret it as a Christian document. So what she said no longer applies. The Constitution from here to here has transformed. So the Sunday law issue has transformed. So those movements you had that were then in progress, there was the movements in the 40s and 50s in progress, and then now in progress. So we're tracking their course. By tracking their course, it brings clarity on the issue, and using that how the Constitution became Christian. So then in progress, then in progress, now in progress. Okay, so the first Great Awakening in the 1700s, the key figure was George Whitefield, and the issue was old side versus new side, and it was a fight between the more strict and more liberal views of Calvinism. The conservatives called the liberals emotional, that they used emotionalism in their revivals. And in the Second Great Awakening, the key figure was Charles Finney, and the issue was old school. This here where it should say school, old school versus new school, the conservatives versus the liberals, and it was a theological fight over Calvinism. It was the same as the First Great Awakening, especially when it comes to doctrines such as predestination that no longer fit their Republican view as an American citizen. The conservatives accused liberal revivalists of emotionalism. Two streams developed through Protestantism. They find their base in different universities. Yale switched from a conservative to a liberal university early on, which is why you see many Republicans and conservatives today attack universities. They're breeding grounds of liberalism and sin. Adventism has had similar views, but you can trace much of it back to how these universities stood through the Great Awakenings. Princeton became a bulwark of conservatism, fundamentalist conservatism, or Calvinism. So if you guys remember talking of what it means to be conservative, and it means to conserve, to hold on to something, right? So they want to hold on to what they had. They don't want to change, progress. They want to hold on to what they had. And the new school comes along, and new ideas, new thoughts, new understandings, and then becomes this battle that becomes these two streams of Protestantism. And in those A.T. Jones documents we read, we can see how he traces out the history all the way back to John Knox and Scotland. And I found that really interesting. I'm going to turn on my phone here just a second so I can watch, but I don't want to, well, if I just don't join the audio, I can watch in case you guys say anything, because I got everything completely off now to where I can't see anything except for the screen, if that made sense. Okay, so if you do have anything to say, just speak up so that I know. Okay, so A.A. Hodge led Princeton for some of the most significant years. And he says Princeton claimed that Calvinism of the Reformation had been preserved without flaw at Princeton. We trace Calvinism through the Covenanters, and they would say that hadn't changed at all, and that they hold on to all those Calvinist principles. Hodge declared, "I'm not afraid to say that a new idea never originated in this seminary. How can you have a new idea when the old ideas are perfect?" And it's kind of interesting, the different things that happen in our lives. But I was going back and forth with one of my clients on some stuff that I was doing for them, and she was helping me along with it. And she said with all the COVID and everything that came out, everything came out, kind of put them in a position that if those that were not working virtually and didn't make that transition, what a parable it was. They were working in with the old ideas of you have to meet people face to face and do things a certain way. And yet what I've watched over the past year is some of them, and I try to help and encourage anywhere I can, some of them really struggle when it came to technology and going virtual and going away from the way that they'd always done things and having to go. But I thought it was interesting because she mentioned she's old school. she does stuff virtually, but it was just funny that phrase came up. She's old school, and I was thinking about sometimes you have to let go of those old ideas. But what we're hearing here is that Hodge is saying that there's nothing new to come because it's not broke. It's perfect. We don't need anything new. Did that make sense?
I think so.
Okay. So if you put yourself back there in this time period, in the First Great Awakening, and you've got this real strict, let's leave the word Calvinism out of it, but just you have this real strict religion, and you believe that you're the true church and that Christ is your king and he's the king of this nation and he's to be a ruler over this nation, and you're what's the word you use? Conservator? Is that the word? That might be the wrong word. Maybe somebody knows the word I'm looking for. But you're the one that's the keeper of the key to enforce it all. And you got others that are coming along. Like look at Martin Luther, for instance. When it came to Catholicism and Protestantism, that's probably a good example to try to get I point across what I'm trying to say. All people knew was Catholicism. And now they start getting the Bibles in their hands and they're realizing Catholicism is wrong. Now, I don't know if that's the case with this issue, but they came to want to do things a different way, see things a different way. And these revivals were to bring revival to people in religion. And that meant out of the old school and into the new school. Did that make sense?
Yeah.
You okay? Okay.
Yeah.
Make sure you're okay. So conservatism is, in its most literal sense, it completely rejects any concept of progression or restoration. It is what it is, and we're not changing. If you reject what we teach about progression, you have to agree with Hodge when he says the following: if Christ is Lord of Lords, King of Kings, if he is really the ruler among the nations, then all the nations are in the highest sense one nation, under one king, one law, having one interest and one end. There cannot be two laws for Christians, one to govern the relations of individuals and the other the relations to nations. And that's the point that A.T. Jones was bringing out. I think that was the document we read before Monday, the one before that, but showing that how they view the nation as an individual. That they view, I think you were there with that one, Christine, how they view the nation as an individual, like Israel, as it's a nation, but it was viewed as an individual. I don't know if I'm expressing that right, so somebody correct me if I'm expressing it wrong. But so if Christ was ruler of the nation, then everybody in that nation has to be all what that nation is. And this is saying that there cannot be two laws for Christians, one to govern the relations of the individuals and the other the relations of the nation. So the application, you can't have one law that says Christian keeps the Sabbath, a Christian keeps the Sabbath for them on Sunday, and then not have that impact the national state law. They're going to merge together. You can't separate the two. One nation under one king, one law, no separate laws for individuals, and then state laws. So the summary, there's no separation between church and state. Calvinism, the Church of the Covenanters, old school thinking, fed through Princeton Seminary. The first and the Second Great Awakenings were rebellions against that. So the liberal side, the liberal stream, the progression, the ones looking for progression and restoration. So you can't have this union of church and state. And so the first and second great awakenings were rebellions against that. Okay, so the Protestant hierarchy hated these awakenings, the great awakenings. The ministers taught the people to free themselves from the hierarchy. So you've got the liberal ministers, the ones doing the revivalist ministers that are teaching the people to free themselves from that hierarchy. Well, if you're the hierarchy that they're trying to pull you out of, they're going to fight back. So it became like a revolution, and the hierarchy started to lose power. So now there's a threat, right? Hierarchy starts to lose power, and it became a fight over that power.
Follow that by yourself.
Huh? So you get that? Everybody's following that? Is that
Sorry
a
about-
question?
Can you repeat that again?
Will I repeat it? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay. So the Protestant hierarchy, we're looking at the conservative side, hated the awakenings. So the old school hated the awakenings that the new school was putting out, which was about progression and restoration. And the ministers, those revivalist ministers, which were your new school ministers, taught the people to free themselves from that hierarchy, from that system. And it became like a revolution. And the hierarchy, the conservative Calvinists that didn't believe that you should have progress or restoration, it was their way or the highway, they started to lose power. So it became a fight over or for that power because they didn't want to lose their power. Did I say it a little bit better that time?
Mhm.
Who's I can't tell who's talking. Is that
Yes.
Latina?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you have a question? Can I try to do it different?
No, thank you.
Okay, you kind of got it?
Getting it. Yes.
Okay. It kind of makes sense as we continue to go on, because when you look at what they did and then you take what we see in the Democrat and Republican Party today, and she's going to pull it together to where it really helped me a lot. So the awakenings, that's the liberal side, the progressives and the ones that want a restoration, the revivalists, the awakenings started to pull away from that Orthodox Calvinism, that strict Orthodox Calvinism. So it's 1840, and a message comes that cuts away at Orthodox Calvinism. Then what's that message in 1840 that comes? You have Miller coming in. William Miller coming in. Now the message started earlier, but it's during this particular time period where you after August 11th, 1840, when Islam was restrained, and we all know that prophecy. Then you have these messages that a great impetus was given to the work. So 1840 to 1844, there's a message that comes that cuts away at that Orthodox Calvinism. And it requires you to be willing to sever yourself from your denominational hierarchy, to listen and follow nobodies in the church system, and to think and reason. So that's how they viewed it. Is Millerism comes in, and it's a message that's going to cut away at that conservatism, and it requires you to be willing to sever yourself from that hierarchy, that conservative Orthodox Calvinism, and to go and listen to nobodies in the church system to think and reason. So she might be talking here about the revivalists, but we know what we're going to follow that through to when the Millerite movement is, and that did begin in 1840. So you've got this division that's going on, that went on in the first and second great awakening between the old side, new side, the old school, the new school. So you have these two streams of Protestantism now. You've got the strong conservatives, and then you have the liberals, or those progressives that want restoration. And then comes in another message. So here, I think what she's talking about is just the liberal side coming in with the Great Awakening, the Second Great Awakening, because the Second Great Awakening was 1798 to 1844. So you can see there was a lot of things happening all at once. So, and we'll see the progress of that, where they needed to go from there. So people are leaving the Orthodox Calvinism, leaving their hierarchy to go and listen to, in their eyes, nobodies in the church system, so that they can actually think and reason for themselves. Any questions on that?
No.
Okay, so can you do that if you sided with the old school in the Second Great Awakening? So if you stuck with the Great Awakening, if you stuck with the old school in the Second Great Awakening, can you do that? No. The fight, separate to the Millerites, was, will you at all costs cling to your denominational leaders, those influential men, or are you willing to think for yourself and sever from them? So this is before she's bringing the Millerite message in here. She's talking about the old school, new school, and would you be willing, with through this Great Awakening and the revivalists and the liberal side, the liberal stream, would you be willing to let go of your hierarchy system and that conservative Calvinistic teaching? Are you willing to sever yourself from them and go listen to people in the churches that nobody knows? And are you willing to go and think for yourself? So people who sided with Calvinism and the old school had already made their decision before they may have ever heard William Miller. So if you compare and contrast that to our, when you see Democrats and Republicans, and you see where we approach 2019 and us as a movement having to come out of that conservatism, right? This is an external battle that was within religion to come out of that old system and come into the new system. This is before, separate to William Miller. So can you see the parallels today? So let's pause there, and if anybody has any questions or comments, can you see the parallels in that today? Trying to keep us active, interactive. Anybody?
Is that the question?
Yeah, I'm wondering if you guys can see the parallels today with this old school, new school. Old school hanging on to their old ways, and nothing needs changing because it's perfect. And you've got the new school, the revivalist ministers, and seeking progression and restoration. And it's pulling away from the conservative side. The conservative side is losing power. And people are going away and leaving to go think for themselves. And you have people who sided with Calvinism in the old school had already made their decision. So yeah, so can you see the parallel in that today?
Yeah.
With
the liberals.
Huh? I don't know if you guys are trying to talk and I'm not hearing it, or is it just me?
Maybe that.
Yeah, what's going on with the Republicans, the conservatives, the ultra right versus the liberals, the Democrats, even in the Democrats, the more liberal, more progressive, those who are for human right, and those who just want to conserve their own power.
Right.
Yeah, so there is that definite struggle that you see between the two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is a work being done separate to this movement, largely separate from religion. Protestants had already been divided into two streams. So way back in that history, they were divided into two streams, and we still see Protestantism today divided into two streams. So those that sided with the Millerites felt compelled that the message was the truth, that the Millerite message was the truth. In Spiritual Gifts, Ellen White covers that history. And what are the Protestant ministers doing? People would try to break free from their companies. If everybody remembers reading that, they would try to break free from their companies. And through vision, she could see that these ministers had been binding them together. So no one could pull away from their denominations or their fellowships. These ministers were attempting to hold on to the people and the power. If you'd already sided with the old school in the Second Great Awakening, if you'd already submitted yourself to be bound by that hierarchy, it would be extremely difficult to separate yourself and join the Millerites. So when we compare that to and contrast that to our history, when we see the things that are taking place externally are actually, it's living out this parable of drawing people. I still always go back to my thoughts on Pharaoh and Moses, let my people go. And there were those that came out, but those that are going to hang on to those old school ideas, they don't come out. They stay there. And it's extremely difficult at that point to separate yourself. In other words, those in that far right Christian, conservative, Republican side, they pretty much are gone. And I know I've heard her say that as well. Already lost, already made their decision and already lost. So if you're not willing, and I have family that is on that side. I don't know what happens when you have people that are their family, they don't go to church, they don't read the Bible, they don't know anything, they're just going along with what is said. They still have to come through and come out of that stuff. And if they don't, so very difficult to come out. So if you're not willing to question your ancient Calvinist traditions and teachings, I've been taught from a young age, my grandparents were taught, we almost universally all believe in predestination, and I won't question. So she's talking out what their thinking is. I'm not going to go through this, I'm not going to question. So then the message of William Miller could have none effect. So if you're going to hold on to those, you're not going to question those Calvinist traditions. You're not going to step away and think that progression or restoration, all those things that they were standing for at the time, and talking about how we all believe in predestination. I'm not going to question anything. So here's this new message, and I'm not going to question my leadership, and I'm not going to listen to that message of the liberal Protestantism. Then if you're in that state of mind, then the message of William Miller is going to have no effect on you. You needed to be pulled from conservative Calvinism and be willing to be severed from your Protestant leadership. That work had already begun externally, really from the 1790s. So in Life Sketches 80, chapter 5, where are Ellen White's parents taking her? They're taking her to the meetings of the Second Great Awakening. So here's her family, and they're Methodists, I believe, right? Mm-hmm. And they're going to the meetings of the Second Great Awakening. And this had both positive effect and negative effects. The positive was that they were on the right stream to join William Miller once they heard the message. So they weren't in that conservative stream. They were in the right stream to join William Miller once they heard Miller's message. If they had been in the wrong stream or old school, there would likely be no Ellen White. External streams, Ellen White and her family are in the correct stream. So there's two external streams, just like we have two here, the two streams here. Ellen White and her family were in that right stream, not the conservative Calvinistic teachings, but they were attending the messages of the Second Great Awakening. And so what we're understanding here is that those that were in that revivalist mindset were ones that could be ready to hear the message of William Miller. And Ellen White was one of them, her family. So in our last dispensation, that would have been as far as we went. So if you look at pre-2019, that would have been as far as we went. You had to come out. Life was in the new school, death was in the old school. So if you're looking at the second great awakening here, and you were to put that down here, old side, new side, liberal side, conservative side. If you were in the new school, or if you're in the liberal side in our history, there was life there. That's pre-2019, but you had to continue to progress. And death was in the old school. So the old school, if you were to put that here in our history here, the old school would be your far right Republicans, and the new school would be considered externally your Democrat liberal side. So they were on the stream that would lead to life. Ellen White and her family, they're on the right stream that would lead to life. And that was the stories of the Hiddekel and Uli. So now there's a complication. What did Charles Finney say? Charles Finney was on the new school. People are lazy and distracted. This is the new school and the revivalist ministers. And Charles Finney said that people are lazy and distracted. How do you break down the laziness and the distraction? Because it's interesting, because when you look at liberals today, they're not paying attention. A lot of them aren't paying. There's those that are religious, but there's a lot of them that are not paying attention to religion. So how do you break down the laziness and the distraction, and you bring in a tidal wave of emotionalism? And that's what she was writing about that emotionalism. Then Life Sketches 80, 139, paragraph 2. My mind remained in this condition for months. I had usually attended the Methodist meetings with my parents, but since becoming interested in the soon appearing of Christ, I had attended the meetings on Casco Street. That was the Miller meetings. The following summer, my parents went to the Methodist camp meeting at Buxton, Maine, taking me with them. I was fully resolved to seek the Lord in earnest there and obtain, if possible, the pardon of my sins. So they were attending Methodist meetings. This would be of the second great revival, or the second great awakening meetings. And she's interested in the soon appearing of Christ. And she had actually attended meetings on Casco Street. The following summer, my parents went to the Methodist camp meeting. This would still be part of the Great Awakening. And they took her with them, and she's wanting to seek the Lord, if possible, pardon for her sins. There was a great longing in my heart for the Christian's hope and the peace that comes of believing. So if you think about us on our journey and how we see other people, along my journey, you see people, even in this movement, you see people that are seeking the truth, but they come to a place where they won't cross over. If that made sense. They come to a place that something that they don't accept and won't keep moving forward. Whoops. Why did it do that? Did you see that, Christine?
I saw a whole bunch of slides.
Yeah.
I don't know why it did that.
It's like a gallery view.
I didn't touch anything.
That okay, that's weird.
Well, I mean, I hit my cursor, my mouse just to advance it. That's weird. Okay.
It might have been over that spot. I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't.
Oh, weird. I've never seen that before. Okay, so some things at this camp meeting perplexed me exceedingly. So she's at this Methodist camp meeting. I could not understand the exercises of many persons during the conference meetings at the stand and in the tents. They shouted at the top of their voices, clapped their hands, and appeared greatly excited. Quite a number fell through exhaustion, it appeared to me. But those present said they were sanctified to God, and this wonderful manifestation was the power of Almighty upon them. After lying motionless for a time, these persons would rise and again talk and shout as before. She talks further down about the people who become sick from the excitement and loss of sleep. At another place, she talks about the mental illness that developed from the emotionalism and fear, especially the fear. These were tactics that these traveling ministers used in the Second Great Awakening, the emotionalism. This caused her so much heartache as a young person. They gave her no relief, but increased her discouragement. And this is one place where you see her fall into despair. And then she accepts the message of the Millerites. Still, I observed that some of those who pretended to be sanctified manifested a bitter spirit when the subject of the soon coming of Christ was introduced. This did not seem to me a manifestation of the holiness which they professed. I could not understand why ministers from the pulpit should so oppose the doctrine that Christ's second coming was near at hand. Reformation had followed the preaching of this belief, and many of the most devoted ministers and laymen had received it as the truth. It seemed to me that those who sincerely loved Jesus would be ready to accept the tidings of his coming and rejoice that it was near at hand, and yet they weren't. I'm going to pause here for just a second. And give
Okay.
me just a minute, because I know I'm still in a, I don't know which one I have open. Because I have one file that I saved it in the wrong place. And we are on page 20. So give me just another second. Because I updated one and the other one I didn't, so. Okay. You can't, I didn't stop share, so I don't know if you saw what I changed over to. And I hope I have the right one now. I'll know when we read it because I know the changes that I made, and I wasn't seeing some of the changes that I'd made. Okay, so we're going to go back to, okay. Still, I observed that some of those who pretended to be sanctified manifested a bitter spirit when the subject of the soon coming of Christ was introduced. So they get bitter when they realize, and you think that that's what she thought that's what they're all there for, is looking forward to Christ's coming. And so the messages of William Miller come in, and the prophecies being fulfilled, and Christ is coming, and she sees them manifesting a bitter spirit when that subject comes up. This did not seem to me a manifestation of the holiness which they professed, because they're claiming to be sanctified. I could not understand why ministers from the pulpit should so oppose the doctrine that Christ's second coming was near at hand. Reformation had followed the preaching of this belief, and many of the most devoted ministers and laymen had received it as the truth. It seemed to me that those who sincerely loved Jesus would be ready to accept the tidings of his coming and rejoice that it was near at hand. She's observing these people who have embraced the second great awakening. They've given the physical manifestations of emotionalism that were required. They're crying, they're clapping their hands, claiming to love Jesus. Yet when they're presented with a message that says that that same Jesus is about to return, they manifest bitterness. Ellen White is confused. This does not seem to be the manifestation of the holiness which they professed, and the majority of the people who embraced the second great awakening did not embrace Millerism. So if you can see, you kind of follow this, that you have this old side, new side, old school, new school, this battle that's going on. And in here in 1840 to 1844, she's attending these meetings of the second great awakening, the liberal stream. And she sees all this emotionalism. And when the subject of William Miller's prophecies comes in about the second coming of Christ, they express bitterness. And she's confused as to why that would be. Why it's kind of like me with Adventism, we probably all felt certain things. It's like, why wouldn't we be excited to hear truth that is going to bring you to the end and bring you to this? You know, why would you just want to stop and stay there where you're at if light comes in? And yet that's what they do. So she's confused in this history. And what they needed to do was leave that new side and join the Millerites. So there's two external streams. One will lead you to death and one will lead you to life. The old school will lead you to death and the new school will lead you to life. So if you were able to leave that old school, if you did leave that old school when you were called to leave that hierarchy and that old way and get into progressive restoration side, it would lead to life. And pre-2019, it would lead to life. But you were not finished yet. You still had to follow on. You needed to come from the New School stream and become a Millerite. So in that history, they had to leave the New School. Here she is at the Methodist camp meetings, going to the Methodist camp meetings and seeing all this happen and all these people around her. What they were more in a position to hear the message of Christ's return from the Millerite message, and were to then make that transition. As they cry they love Jesus, they're going to be presented with the 2,300 days and then tested. So the same thing is repeated today. There's two external streams. The world is divided. Those who cling to Donald Trump, Republicans and conservatism are now in racism, sexism, and homophobia. Wanting to get rid of all these things, that's who they are. That's who they are. So they cannot sever themselves from that to join us. So those that cling to Donald Trump could not let go of that and can't sever themselves to join us. But for the millions who wear Black Lives Matter t-shirts, who claim to believe in equality, who claim to love in the Second Great Awakening, where everyone's Protestant, we would just say, love Jesus. But for the millions today who just claim to love, that's that liberal side, our day, liberal side, the Black Lives Matter wearing a t-shirt, they will be tested. And the test will be that they can't just stay. They can't stay there. They have to join this movement. They need every part of this message. So those that may have broke free from Donald Trump, if they broke free and came to the liberal side, they would be more ready perhaps to hear the message of this movement, but they will be tested and they have to accept every bit of this movement. So the shaking last year, people did not see the transition from the New School here. This Millerite is supposed to be over here with this. People did not see the transition from the New School to the Millerite movement. And they thought last year when we went through this, they thought that Michael Moore gets it right. They think that Hollywood gets it. And they thought a liberal atheist world gets it. If they claim to get it, they joined this movement. If they really get it, they join this movement. What they needed to accept was every single thing on that chart. So looking at this history again, they had to accept, those on the New School had to accept everything on that chart. You say you love Jesus, here's the 2,300-day prophecy. People have thought the world is so much better than this movement. The world does not get equality, no matter what slogans they wear on their t-shirts. Is everybody following? Okay. Okay.
Yes.
I hope it's helpful. It's really helped me. Maybe you all got it long before I did. So, but it's been very helpful to me. So in the Millerite history, if someone said they loved, they were tested with the chart. They looked at that chart and didn't see love in every part of it. So you would have people that would be tested on this message and they don't see love in every part of it. Is the love in the emotion, or is the love in accepting the 2,300-day prophecy? They would say emotion and we would say prophecy. We're faced with the same issue. Can people see the love in the vows of this movement? Many can't, but the love is there, just as the evidence of the love was found in the 1843 chart. The old school leads to death, the new school leads to life, but only if you make that transition to the Millerite movement, because what they claimed had to be tested. So the new school would claim to love Jesus, but they had to be tested. Are they going to receive the message of Jesus? People externally who appear to be on the right side today will be tested. So the Lincoln Project, I think we've all heard of that. what's her name? Why can't I think of the blonde girl? Kellyanne Conway, her husband was part of the founding of the Lincoln Project, I believe. Republicans who now attack Trump and the Republican Party, that's who the Lincoln Project is. They're Republicans that attack Trump and the Republican Party. You would think that they're in the new school. So if they're attacking Trump, you would think that they're in the new school, but their methods and treatment of the people they disagree with is disgusting. They claim to love. It's not enough to be anti-Trump, like these Lincoln Project people, or to wear Black Lives Matter t-shirts. It's not enough. Coming to the Sunday law, everyone will be tested. So how the Constitution became Christian. Back to the document. This document begins with an introduction. Jared A. Goldstein says in the introduction that he is tracing the Constitution from being a godless document, the first history, to being the highest expression of the nation's Christian identity, our history, how that perception changed over 3 specific movements, how these 3 movements are all follow the same pattern. So in the first movement, there's a group threat. The prototypes start to panic. We see that when we're looking at the Great Awakening. The prototypes then begin to panic in a nationalistic response from them. And then they make demands based on the Constitution. So there's a threat, prototypes panic, have a nationalistic response, and then they make demands on the Constitution. And that was this history here, to amend the Constitution. And this is true in all 3 movements, movements. So this movement, there's a threat in each movement, and then they make demands, or not to make demands on the Constitution, but it's the steps that would go progress through. So on page 267 of how the Constitution became Christian, he lays out who the threat was. So this is where Ellen White stands here in 1888. And the threat that Protestantism is responding to is from the Catholics, the Jews, the Seventh-day Adventists, and the free thinkers. So this is the threat is coming from the Catholics, Jews, Seventh-day Adventists, and free thinkers. And now in 1888, would they have elected a Catholic president? No, they're not friends. Catholicism here in the US, they're not friends with the Catholics. It's important for us to understand that Catholicism is the threat coming through who they consider to be dirty Irish immigrants. But so many, especially Irish, were coming into the country. People were afraid because the Catholics are saying, we don't want to send our Catholic children to a state school or a public school and have them taught your version of Protestantism. Jews, Adventists, and free thinkers are all saying the same thing. So these four, the Catholics, Jews, Seventh-day Adventists, free thinkers, encapsulate a threat. And they weren't hiding the fact that they felt threatened. The document will speak about that. I want to spend a moment on free thinking. So we're about to end. I want to summarize this first history and make a final point. But I suspect many people aren't sure what free thinkers are. There's 2 Wikipedia pages that we can look up. Free thought, that will give you some information. But look up the golden age of free thought, and that will tell you that this golden age was the late 1800s, this same history. It really began to be a more formalized movement in the 1870s. They had a couple of famous orators who led them. You may know of Robert G. Ingersoll. So they're becoming quite influential in the midst of this history of Protestantism, feeling threatened. So these free thinkers are becoming more influential during the time that Protestantism is feeling threatened. And what free thinkers thought was the following. Up to now, they all sound so positive. Doesn't everyone want to be a free thinker? So it sounds like a good thing to be a free thinker. I would say anything that I believe cannot be because of an authority. This is what they say, the free thinkers. I would say anything that I believe cannot be because of an authority, tradition, revelation, or dogma. It can only be based on logic, reason, and studied evidence, empirical observation. And this particularly applies for religious teaching. This might seem awfully close to what Elder Parmenter taught this morning. I would argue it's not the same thing. When they say you cannot believe something based on authority or revelation, they do away completely with the concept of inspiration. The Bible, a man-written document, might say something about history. If you can't prove a king existed, then he didn't exist, and it doesn't matter what the Bible says. And this had recently been empowered by a particular book written by Charles Darwin that seemed to give them logic, reason, and empirical observation. So they transformed over time. Back then, most freethinkers were agnostics. Today, there are a few agnostics. Most just became atheists because they cannot trust in documents they believe are man-written, and is particularly influential through Charles Darwin. It's a rebellion against really any form of religious authority. So they're a threat. So the freethinkers are a threat. It all begins with this issue of the Civil War. The covenant is largely laid out in that whole enterprise, and they formed the National Reform Association that we should know of well because we're Adventists. After the Civil War, they restructure this organization. They go through a transformation. And between the end of the Civil War in 1888, they're seeing more and more of these four threats, and they're mobilizing to oppose them. Now, again, you had two external streams in this history. To oppose the NRA, another association formed called the Free Religious Association to oppose the National Reform Association. Adventists stood clear of both. We charted our own course. So the National Reform Association, in response, as an attack, another group formed the Free Religious Association. It's all about equality. Adventists do not get involved in this. They later formed their that's not supposed to be literally, their league that they formed with religious liberty. So I'm not sure what I was supposed to say there. The religious league in the 1890s. So by the time you get to 1888, what demands are Protestants making? What do they want done? They want to amend the Constitution and enact a Sunday law. If they were just to enact a Sunday law, remember, they are the prototype and the threats don't belong. So they want to enact a Sunday law. They're the prototype and the threats don't belong as part of this. If they enact a Sunday law, it takes care of the freethinkers. The nation is following Protestantism from the top levels of government. It takes care of Adventists and Seventh-day Baptists. And it takes care of Jews if they want to enact a Sunday law. But it doesn't take care of the Catholics. So you also very much need an amendment to the Constitution because the Sunday law gives homage, obeisance, or worship to Catholicism. You can have a Sunday law in a Catholic country. So they need to stipulate that we are Protestant. And we read some of that in A.T. Jones' documents. So they needed to stipulate that we are Protestant so we can fully distinguish ourselves away from the Catholics. Their response is not random. It is calculated to directly take down who they see as the threat. 3 of the 4 are taken down by the issue over the Sunday law. And the 4th, Catholicism, is taken down by an amendment to the Constitution. And if you have both, Protestantism is enshrined, the national identity is protected, and the prototype secured in the documents. Any comments or questions? Everybody's following okay?
I think so.
Okay. I just want to make one point before we close, because we're going to tackle the 1950s in more detail. But late 1940s is post-Second World War. So the war ended in 1945. Our first history, the threats are Christianity. It's this group here, it's Christianity. Protestantism is on the attack against these 4. But in the late 1940s, in the late 1940s, post-Second World War, our first history of threats of Christianity. Okay, so First World War, Second World War, and many fascist organizations completely trashed the name Christian through their use of it. A Christian organization became associated with fascism. So they made another calculated move. Jews are no longer a threat because post-Second World War, you would not dare after what Hitler did. So they unite with the Jews and they become allies in that history. So the Jews aren't a threat anymore. Now they embrace the title Judeo-Christian West. They were arresting and imprisoning Jews here. They begin to transform because the threat has changed. Can they have a Sunday law now that they're the Judeo-Christian West? Because you have to protect the Jews who keep the Sabbath. The response has to be an attack on the threat. The minute you change who the threat is, you have to change your methods of attack. So the Sunday law is not an issue here because you've embraced the Jews and they're going to be allowed to keep the Sabbath, and you're going to allow them to keep the Sabbath. So the Sunday law is not an issue for them. The threat is communism in this history. So you're now going to have Billy Graham, who's going to link capitalism with Protestantism to protect the Judeo-Christian West. And this is during the McCarthy era. Jews are not the threat here. Therefore, you cannot have a Sunday law response. In fact, they brought in the Jewish community as an ally. In the same history, Adventism is no longer a threat. First of all, there is no Sunday law. If the Jews can keep Sabbath, we can keep Sabbath, so it's not an issue. And then in that same history, we were so afraid of being called a cult because all those people religiously following Calvin accused us of following Ellen White, and we let go of our identity. So in this history here, we're heading into the third generations, prophetically speaking. The fourth generation, the sins of our fathers, Judeo-Christian West, Jews, not a threat. Adventists, not a threat. Catholicism is transforming. Communism is the threat. So when there's a different threat, there's going to be a different response. So between 1950 and 1979, there's three movements. And we'll go through those two histories in more detail next time. I just want to summarize those three histories. Just people, do you guys remember the three histories? The three movements?
Yes, but it's not coming to me right this second.
The
In civil rights?
civil rights, feminism, and Stonewall.
Stonewall, yeah. Yeah. So those histories are what led us up to here. And that's in the next study, though. Through this camp meeting, we've discussed different subjects, but they're completely linked. Externally, hey, you gotta get down, stay down. Externally, these Protestants believe they are the prototype, and it leads them into racism, sexism, and homophobia. So those would be those three movements. She pulled something up on the screen. So through this camp meeting, we've discussed different subjects, but they are completely linked. Externally, these Protestants believe they are the prototype, just like you saw in the first two histories, and it leads them into racism, sexism, and homophobia, or in that history. Today, the fight against sexism in this movement has faced opposition because of the concept of a prototype. So we discussed the nature of heaven, the Godhead, Lucifer, the angels, 6,000 years of progression documented in the Bible, 66 books all written by men, documenting that sexism that has pervaded humanity for the last 6,000 years. And we should be seeing a transformation. You can see it clearly between the beginning and the end of ancient Israel. But as our written inspiration ends here, you can see on the red up here, written inspiration ends, or this one here, sorry. Our written inspiration ends here with Ellen White. We have to be willing to see that transformation had not ended here. We're still in that process. So we're still in this process here. You can see externally, it's old school of Hodge and Princeton that rejected that. That is why they are the stream that carries the danger. That is why it's the Falwells, not the liberal Clinton Biden faction that enacts the Sunday law. Adventism, by and large, falls into the wrong stream. God has given us structures at the end of the world that will teach us the history from 1798 to now, the history of Catholicism, Protestantism, and Adventism. We're focusing on Protestantism because we want to understand the Sunday law. So there's again the structures that God has given us on Adventism, papacy, Catholicism, and Protestantism. And for those Adventists, which you just said that they're by and large in the wrong stream, those that are the strong conservatives and the Trump supporters did not make that transition. And you have to make that transition and come out of that. But then you also have to then, and you have a better chance of accepting this message. But just like those that were wrapped up in all the emotionalism in the New School and the Great Awakening, that did not want to hear that Jesus was coming back. They proved that they did not truly love Jesus. The message comes and you have to prove, they had to prove that they truly loved Jesus by hearing the message and responding and coming out of that New School stream. So we're tracing the fundamentalism and the liberalism. It's not enough to be an external liberal. That will be tested. So looking at the liberals today, there are three movements of Protestantism, each trying to force their identity onto the nation because they see their identity threatened. In the history of Ellen White, these four down here were the threats. So she said that movement in progress would amend the Constitution and enact a Sunday law to destroy the threat. We focus on ourselves, but we were one part of that. They had some successes, but they largely failed. So post Second World War, there's a new threat. They look at that threat and define it in nationalistic terms. It's the city on a hill against that godless communism. The threat changes, so the response changes. No longer are the Jews or Adventists the threat. It's a stepping stone between the first movement and the third. By the third, we're practically part of them as the Adventist structure. That's why Adventism falls at the Sunday law. They gave up their identity in the 50s because they were accused of being a cult. Because they followed a person, they stopped being a threat, and no matter how many times the conservative Adventist preaches against the Sunday law, they have joined and walked in step with the daughters of Babylon. They can't see that they're on the same side. So it's a different threat now, so there's a different response. And we're in a history when we're starting to understand what that will be. But it all brings us back around to the subject of equality. So we'll read her prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for how you have led your people. We see so much love in what you have done. May we understand what love is. I pray that we will see it in the messages and in the vows of this movement, even in what we might not have imagined is love. We've reached the end of this camp meeting. I pray that people will be blessed as they contemplate on what was taught, that you will help our thinking to transform, that we might think and see as you think and see and treat each other accordingly. You know the civil war that goes on in this movement for equality. There are so many vulnerable who are told what we teach incorrectly by those who misunderstand and oppose us. We pray that you give people a clear understanding of what is being taught, a clear understanding of the structures and the lines, and that especially the vulnerable will be able to see and hear and accept it. I pray that we will all see our personal need, make an effort to have that upper room experience of uniting with each other. We're looking out at the movement and see that only comes with equality. Only that is causing unity. May people not just accept it, may they practice. So we place each member in your hands. In Jesus' name, amen. So how are you guys doing on, each of you, on understanding this part of the message? So we can kind of talk about it and see how we're doing.
I don't know. It just, I think I'm making it too simple, because to me, it just seems like if you just treat each other with the respect and, be selfless, then, but I think I'm boiling it down to making it too easy, because everybody makes it sound so hard. So I don't know. Maybe I'm not getting it.
Well, I think that it sounds so hard because they have hate hidden in their heart and they don't want to think that God would allow certain groups to be saved, or certain behaviors that they might just have completely instilled in them that are behaviors of heaven, and they can't see past it. Or self is involved. Yeah, self is involved, and they don't want to let go of their bad behavior.
So I'm not making it too simple. I don't know.
That part of it, no. But I mean, are you understanding, tracing the history of the liberal and the liberal and conservative side? Are you understanding all those connections that we're going through?
I think so. I mean, I see it happening before us. I see
Yeah.
people being just ridiculously selfish by refusing to get vaccines, or, I don't know.
And think about it
They're-
pre Donald Trump. Think about it pre Donald Trump. That wasn't visible.
Right.
Or as
It was there, it just wasn't visible.
it
People
wasn't
weren't.
as visible.
Mhm.
And Donald Trump unleashed people to be who they are
Mhm.
and speak what they are. And so when you think about that in terms of what we learn about the agricultural model and how a message comes in and it divides, it was a gray area pre-Donald Trump. You didn't know what was in the hearts of people. Think about harvest and how the rain comes down to ripen it just before the harvest, right?
Mhm.
So you didn't see what was inside various people until that rain came down and ripened them. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So now we can see it. But if we hold on, go ahead.
Yeah, I suppose that's what it means by, when God says he rains on the just and the unjust.
Right.
So by raining on both, you
Right.
get to see the fruit of both.
Yeah, because the message is going to come down on everybody. And for them, it's an external message and these steps that the external events or message are leading them to was first to come out of that hierarchy system, come out of that far right, come out of that all the racism, sexism, and homophobia, come out of all that. But you couldn't come out of that and just jump in and become a liberal or a Democrat. But that gave you the ability to make the next step. And so they have a better chance of taking the step of coming in here. But it really proves, do you really love Jesus? Because when the truth is presented to them, we saw what happened in Ellen White's day, when the truth was presented to them that Jesus was soon returning, that made them bitter and angry. And so they proved that they didn't love Jesus. So you take that to today, people on the liberal side, they may wear a Black Lives Matters t-shirt. They may be strong for gay rights, but do they really love Jesus? they'll all have to prove it by accepting this message. So it was this message and the next one that really prompted me to really start including in my prayers for all of us to fit us up, to meet humanity where they're at, and be there for them as I use the word conduit, and I think that's the right word, as a conduit for the Lord, to prepare them to transition to this movement.
You see that the way you put it, it's making it sound like they have to choose Jesus while they're here. But what if their understanding of Jesus, of God, is not correct, and they die in that? And so because they didn't have a correct understanding of God, they rejected him, but they were good and selfless to other people, treating each other with equality, like Jesus would have done. You know what I'm saying?
I don't have the answer for every individual, whether or not they were ever tested on that, because there's people that die before they're tested on things. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
I guess what I'm saying is, there might be people that rejected God or Jesus because they had a misunderstanding
Right.
of who he was.
Right.
And I can't see them. It doesn't make sense to me
Well, no,
that they
because
would be.
we were all in that same place.
Right.
We didn't understand Jesus. So if they have, I don't want to answer wrong. I'm going to give you my thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
If they're, let's say it's, pre-2019, pre-2021, or, wherever you're at, and they have not had that message come to them, and all they've had is lies and deception of religion, would God destroy them for that purpose?
See, I can't think that he would.
Right. That's how I see it. So we're not talking about people that have already gone to their grave that had all these wrong understandings before all this light opens up. Again, that would maybe go to what she said about people that didn't know Jesus, and maybe that's the question more you're at. Better, maybe I'm better understanding your question now that from earlier, that the people that never had an opportunity to know Jesus.
Because you can never have heard of Jesus, but also you could have heard of him but never understood the correct way and never known him.
Right.
So you can take that two ways. Never known him as never being had any idea of him, and then never known him because never understood.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Because there's an awful lot of lies and deception out there. So I don't have all those answers for you there, but I would think that if you're not here for the test, then you're not judged on that test.
Yeah, if I may,
Yeah.
this is just my thoughts. Elder Parmender, when he speaks about parable, Elder Parmender says Jesus is a parable.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You heard him say that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So if you take that concept, Jesus is a parable, then you say, okay, then not only who is Jesus, but what is Jesus? And all the what's, the types, in the types and figures, right? We've heard that. So the types and figures, and what are the types and figures? The types and figures are in the healing, in the feeding, in the kindness, in all the good things that he does for others. So I believe that in each period, in each dispensation, even though you may not have heard the three angels' message, or what we call the everlasting gospel, come out of her, my people, wouldn't it be fair to say that those who are living the parable of Jesus came out or is out of Babylon, doing those things, living the life of Jesus for that dispensation, for that period in their lives, because they were not living in the end time back then. So they did not hear the message that we have now about equality. So like Ellen White didn't hear the message of equality. Miller didn't hear the message of equality, but they lived the parable of Jesus. And so now we're at the dispensation where we have the full message. And so now people of this age are tested with that full message. And now they have the opportunity to accept it or reject it. And if they reject it, then they are lost. If they accept it, then they are saved. So I think that's what it boils down to, that the parable, that Jesus being a parable, what life did you live in your own time? What, and the test that was given to you, the Good Samaritan, the priest, the Levites, the test that was given to you, did you fail or did you succeed? Well, it was a priest that failed. It was the Levites that failed. It was the Samaritan that passed because he was living in the parable of Jesus. And
Amen.
those are just my thoughts.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I think it made me think of way back when my kids were, Jesse was a baby, and I first actually started selling Mary Kay, and my Mary Kay sales director. I literally found her in a phone book and went and talked to her, and anyways, we became friends. She went to the little church around the corner from me. We both lived kind of near each other. It was the Presbyterian church of all places. And certainly we didn't know any of this, right? She's in a Protestant church. She didn't know any of this. I'm just barely, well, I wasn't even reading the Bible at that time. But she had just started going to church. And it was actually her son that wanted her and the dad, his parents, to go to church. And the son was the reason they started going to church. Now, Sandy was a wonderful person, beautiful person, would do for anybody above herself, always. And she got really involved in like going, back in the day, I didn't know much about church, but going around like new people and welcoming them and going to their home and doing all kinds of really good things. And I'll never forget her funeral. She passed away. Not too long after all that, she called me one day and told me that they'd found spots on her liver. And I said, well, what does that mean? And she said, I don't know. And from that phone call to 5 weeks, she was gone. And I'll never forget her funeral. There was like 300 people there, and many went up and gave story after story after story of her kindness. And one would have to say the test that we're facing today was not there. Where would she be? She was serving the Lord the best that she knew.
Amen.
That's my thoughts on it. Living the parable, I guess. So,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
The very
And
best.
we also had a friend. She died way too young. But it was I it's hard to explain. I mean, I wish she was still living so I can tell her what mistake I made. But she accepted. She was not a Christian, not in the religion of Christianity, but to me she was more Christian than anybody I knew. And a lot of her friends were gay men, She accepted everybody, and some people did not like her because she was just so accepting of others. She was so friendly to others, and some people just had a hard time with that because she was just very friendly, very lovable, non-judgmental. And you know, I say it this way: I tried to teach her about God, but really she taught me about love. And you know, when you know, this is before we were in the movement, and we didn't know about homosexuality and all that. And when she um you know when she would talk about her friends, gay men, and she had more than one, quite a few. And I felt so awkward because she was more Christian than I was, and in the back of me, I knew somehow in the back of me, it's like, she's going to go to heaven before I am. And she has these gay men and these gay friends and these gay guys. And what about that? And so it was, I mean, for me, it was difficult. And that's why I say, 'cause I tried to teach her about God, and I couldn't. Because she was, every time we had this conversation, she was teaching me love, and I felt it. But then, like my mind says, like, okay, but she's not a Christian, and she has homosexual friends. It's like, that was such a battle in my own mind. But I do believe, I mean, at least I believe that she passed the test. And had I not been in this movement, I would have failed the test. So, yeah.
If I were to take and compare that to some that I know today, that I know that are very staunch Trump supporters, we read what Elder Tess said, that if they cling to that, it's like nearly impossible for them to come out of that. And some of those people may do very, nice deeds, good deeds. But specific ones that I don't want to mention, but not anything to do with this movement, just you never know who might stumble upon our videos. But they might do really good deeds, but they'll be, and maybe this might be they might do good deeds, but they're going to do good deeds selectively, only for certain people, and think nothing's wrong with leaving others out of any good deeds. So I think we use the lines as well to tell us as well. And it's not like, we're not at Daniel 12:1 for those that are alive, but it is really hard for, when you think about those that are right there with Trump when it comes to build that wall and keep those people out of here. They just want to come in and take what is ours. They want us to pay their way, and they don't ever stop and look at why those people leave their country to flee here. They have their minds convinced that those people flee their countries to come live off of this system. And yet they'll turn around and talk about loving your neighbor and posting Martin Luther King quotes about loving one another, and not even see that that behavior is showing that you do not love one another. So the lines are showing us, and these histories are showing us, and the events that are taking place were to draw them out of that, but they have to continue that process. This is for those that are alive, obviously. But like Phil said, I'm along with that with you on that side, that they passed the test at their day for whatever that test was. They didn't know anything near what we knew. They're not accountable for what they didn't know. You're only accountable for the life that you have and reject. You're not accountable for the life that you did not have. You didn't have it to reject it. Any comments, Christine?
No. The parable thoughts kind of covered it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. So, well, that's all that I have tonight. If anybody else has anything more, any comments?
Cool.
Phil, would you like to close us in prayer?
Yes. Oh Lord, you are so wonderful. You are marvelous in all your ways. And we're so grateful that we are the beneficiary of your wonderful love. We can't thank you enough. And Lord, we have learned that, you know, when we get to heaven, you know, we're going to be given crowns, and those crowns, Lord, are going to be taken off our heads, and we're going to lay them at your feet. Lord, we're doing that now. We just feel and know and understand how much you love us. So, Lord, you blessed us with this understanding. You have made us wise, because as Daniel 12 says, the wise are the ones who understand. And you have given us that understanding. And you have plucked us, Lord, out of the burning fire. You have saved us. And so, as we realize the enormity of what you have been doing for us and what you continue to do for us and what you will continue to the very end do for us, Lord, all that we have are yours. So thank you, Lord. Thank you for loving us and blessing us, for bringing us together, a fellowship, as we get to discuss, as we get to talk, as we get to learn, as we get to share our feelings, our emotions, our thoughts, openly, freely. We thank you. And thank you enough. And Lord, as we look forward, Lord, we know the days ahead are not going to be easy. But let us look forward to those days that are coming, even though we may face persecution. Lord, we know that that's just going to be a very small part of our eternal lives. What is a small part of persecution compared to all eternity with you? So may you fit us for purpose, fit us for duty. May we be diligent and coming together and sharing and learning and discussing and lifting each other up, edifying one another, that when the time comes, when you say go, that we'll be able to go and go back to the church first and then to the world, to share them of our testimony, our love of Jesus and what he has done for us through parables, that they may see the love of Christ. That for those, Lord, who are on the right side of the issue, that they will come on board. And then those who are on the wrong side of the issue, they will see that Christ is worth it all. And they will be willing to give up whatever they have in this world for the world to come that is given to us by our God. So may we cooperate with you fully. May we be your counterpart that you created us to be. May we walk lockstep with your will, place our will in the side of yours, that we may finish the work and go home. Thank you, Lord. May you continue to bless each and every one of us. Protect us from the evil one. And we meet again Friday evening. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.